The door to the post office swung open so hard it cracked against the wall, and every person inside went still. Declan Rourke stood in the frame like a storm that had learned to walk. 6 feet and some change, shoulders built from 20 years of breaking rock and hauling timber, a jaw so set it looked carved rather than grown. He had mud on his boots from the trail, and 3 days of stubble on his face, and eyes the pale gray of sky before snow. He looked at no one in particular. He looked at everyone. "I need to speak with whoever's running this office," he said. His voice came out low, the kind of low that didn't need volume to fill a room. Lenora Voss was behind the counter sorting mail that had come in on the morning stage. She was 26 years old and had been running the Millhaven post office for 4 of those years, ever since her father's hands started shaking too badly to manage the ink and stamps. She had seen ranchers come in furious about lost parcels. She had seen miners come in drunk and demanding. She had once stood her ground while a man twice her size threatened to pull the counter apart looking for a letter he claimed had been stolen. She set down the bundle of envelopes she was holding. "That would be me," she said. Declan looked at her the way people look at something unexpected, not unkindly, just recalibrating. He walked to the counter. The other 3 people in the room found reasons to be somewhere else very quickly. "I need a letter sent today," he said. "Not tomorrow. Not on the next stage." "Today, the stage already ran this morning," Lenora said. "Next one is Thursday." Something moved across his face. Not anger exactly. Something closer to a man watching a door close that he had been running toward. "There's no rider I can pay?" he asked. "Not through this office." He was quiet for a moment. His hands rested on the counter, and she noticed they were the hands of someone who worked outside. Cracked knuckles, a scar along the left thumb, calluses that had been there so long they'd become part of the skin's geography. "My daughter," he said finally. "She's in Harwick. That's 4 days by stage. I got word this morning that the woman watching her, my sister-in-law, has taken sick. There's no one else." He stopped, started again. "Elspeth is 8 years old, and she doesn't know anyone in that town except my sister-in-law, and if Ruth is laid up in bed, then Elspeth is—" He stopped again. Lenora waited. "She's alone," he said. "My daughter is alone." It was not a bid for sympathy. It was a man reporting a fact that was breaking something inside him in real time. Lenora had lived in Millhaven her whole life. She knew Declan Rourke by reputation the way everyone in a small town knows people they've never met. The Rourke quarry north of town, stone for half the buildings in the county, wife dead of fever 3 years back, man who kept to himself so thoroughly that some people had started to wonder if he was real or just a name on a land deed. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "What does the letter say?" He blinked. "What? The letter you need sent. What does it say?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He put it on the counter. She picked it up and read it. It was addressed to one Ruth Calloway, Elspeth's aunt, and it said in handwriting that was blunt and square and entirely without flourish, "Ruth, I'm coming. Keep Elspeth inside and tell her I'll be there before the week is out. Don't let her be frightened. Declan." Lenora folded the letter and set it back down. "I can't get this to Harwick today," she said, "but I can send a telegraph message to the Harwick post office and ask them to carry word to your sister-in-law. It'll cost you 30 cents. He was already reaching for his pocket. She sent the message. He stood at the counter while she worked, not pacing, not fidgeting, just standing the way men stand when they're holding something heavy and have run out of places to put it down. When she handed him the receipt, he looked at it for a moment like he wasn't seeing it. "She's going to be frightened," he said. Not to Lenora, really, just out loud. "Children are tougher than we think," Lenora said. Then, "And she's got your blood in her. That probably counts for something." He looked up. For the first time since he'd walked through the door, something in his face shifted. Not quite a smile, but the shadow a smile leaves behind. He left without another word. He was back 2 hours later. Lenora was eating lunch at her desk when she heard the door. She looked up and there he was, hat in his hand this time, which meant something different than hat on his head. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I came in here this morning like I owned the place." "You came in like a man with a problem," she said. "I've seen worse." He nodded once. He didn't leave. She waited. "I'm going to Harwick," he said. "I leave in the morning. It'll take me the better part of a week to get there and back, maybe more depending on Ruth's condition." He turned his hat once in his hands. "The thing is, I can't bring Elspeth back here without someone to look after her. I run a quarry. I'm there before dawn most days and I don't come back until dark. She's 8 years old. She can't be left alone all day." "That's a hard situation," Lenora said carefully. "I'd hire someone," he said. "I tried that before. 3 different women over the past year. The first one quit after 2 weeks because the house was too isolated. The second one quit because Elspeth, my daughter, is not unkind, but she's quiet and she's particular, and if she doesn't trust someone, she lets them know. The third one," he stopped. "It doesn't matter. The point is that hired help hasn't worked." Lenora set down her spoon. Mr. Rourke, she said, I'm not sure why you're telling me this. He looked at her steadily. I'm telling you because I need to ask you something and I know how it's going to sound, and I want you to understand that I've thought about it for the past 2 hours and I can't find another way. She said nothing. She just looked back at him. I need someone to come with me to Harwick, he said. Someone my daughter can see and decide whether she trusts. Someone who can take the stage back with us and stay at the house for a few months while I figure out a longer solution. He paused. I'm not asking for charity. I'd pay fair wages. Better than fair. You'd have your own room, your own time in the evenings. The house is. He seemed to realize he was making a sales argument when he hadn't even made the ask yet. What I'm asking is whether you'd consider coming. Lenora looked at him for a long moment. You've known me for 2 hours, she said. I know, he said. You walked in here and barked at everyone in the room. I know that too. And you're asking me to travel 4 days to another town, meet a child I've never met, and then live in your house. Yes. The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was the silence of a question sitting in the air between two people who both understood what it weighed. Why me? Lenora asked. He thought about it. She could see him actually thinking, not just reaching for whatever answer would work. Because when I said Elspeth was alone, he said, you didn't tell me it would be fine, you just waited, and then you helped. He looked down at his hat. I don't need someone who tells my daughter everything is fine. I need someone who helps. Lenora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'd need 2 days to arrange coverage for this office. He looked up. And I'll decide when I meet your daughter whether I stay, she said. If she doesn't want me there, I come home. I won't be where I'm not wanted. That's fair, he said. And I have conditions. Name them. My own room. My own mornings. I wake up early and I need quiet before the day starts. And you tell your daughter the truth about what this arrangement is. Not a story, not a comfortable version. The truth. Children know when you're lying to them and it makes everything harder. He nodded slowly. I can do that. Then I'll consider it, she said. Come back tomorrow morning. He came back the next morning. She told him yes. The stage to Harwick smelled of old leather and someone's pipe tobacco and the particular staleness of a small space with too many miles in it. Declan sat across from Lenora and said almost nothing for the first day. She did not push him. She had brought 2 books and her mending, and she worked on both in turns. And when the stage stopped for the night at a relay station, she ate her supper and went to her room, and that was that. On the second day, he talked a little. Haltingly at first, the way a man talks when he hasn't done it much for a while. He told her about the quarry, where the good seams were, how they cut the stone, the way limestone breaks different from granite. It was clear he loved the work in the specific way that people love things they understand completely. She listened without performing interest, which he seemed to notice. You're not bored, he said, slightly surprised. My father was a farmer, she said. He talked about soil the same way you talk about stone. I grew up knowing more about clay content than most geologists. That almost produced a smile. Almost. On the third day, he told her about Elspeth. Not the facts, 8 years old, brown hair, quiet, but the real things. How she'd started sleeping with the lamp on after her mother died and still did 3 years later, and how Declan had stopped trying to talk her out of it. How she collected small rocks from the quarry waste pile and kept them in a box under her bed organized by color. How she was reading 2 grades above her level, but had refused to go to school for the past year because some of the other children had said something about her mother that Declan still didn't fully know the details of, only that it had closed something in Elspeth that had not reopened. She sounds like she's grieving, Lenora said quietly. She is, Declan said. We both are. Just. He looked out the window at the flat brown prairie going by. We grieve differently. I go to work. She goes quiet. Neither of you is wrong, Lenora said. He looked at her. Grief doesn't have a right shape, she said. It just has to go somewhere. He was quiet for a long time after that. Not the uncomfortable kind of quiet. The kind that means something landed somewhere it needed to land. Ruth Calloway was in better condition than the worst fears had suggested. Not dangerously ill, but genuinely unwell, thin and pale in the way of a woman who had been pushing through something for weeks and had finally stopped. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a way of looking at Lenora that was careful but not unfriendly. You're the one he wired about, Ruth said, from her bed the first morning. I'm helping with Elspeth, Lenora said simply. He said you ran the post office. Ruth looked at her with those sharp eyes. That's a real job. You gave it up to come here? I arrange coverage, Lenora said. I have 2 months. Ruth seemed to weigh this. Then she said, Elspeth is in the garden. She goes there in the mornings. She won't come out for strangers, so don't try to bring her in. Just let her see you. Lenora went to the garden. Elspeth Rourke was small for 8, with her father's coloring, dark hair, pale gray eyes, and the contained stillness of a child who has learned that stillness is a form of protection. She was crouched over something near the fence. She didn't look up when Lenora came outside, but her shoulders changed slightly, the way an animal's shoulders change when it hears something it hasn't classified yet. Lenora sat down on the back step. She did not walk toward Elspeth. She did not call to her. She took out the mending she'd brought in her pocket and started working on it. After about 10 minutes, Elspeth said, without looking up, "What are you fixing?" "A split seam," Lenora said. "In my second best blouse. My best one I take more care with." A pause. "Why don't you take the same care with all of them?" "Because if I treated everything like it was precious, I'd never use any of it. The second best things are for actually living." Elspeth was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up and walked, not quickly, not eagerly, but deliberately, over to where Lenora was sitting. She looked at the mending. "My mother used to say something like that," Elspeth said, "that the good dishes were for Sundays and company, but the chipped ones were for real life." "Smart woman," Lenora said. "She was," Elspeth said. And then she sat down on the step next to Lenora, and the morning went on around them, and Lenora kept mending and said nothing else because nothing else was needed. They stayed in Harwick 11 days. Ruth improved steadily. Declan spent the first several days managing the practical things, making sure Ruth had firewood stacked, that the pantry was full, that a neighbor woman had agreed to check in weekly. He was good at practical things. Lenora noticed that he did them quietly and without asking for acknowledgement, which she found more telling than most things people chose to say out loud. Elspeth moved around Lenora carefully at first, the way a cat moves around something unfamiliar, not afraid exactly, just reserving judgment. By the fourth day she was showing Lenora her rock collection, which she'd brought in a small cloth bag from Millhaven. By the sixth day she was sitting next to Lenora at supper without being asked. On the eighth evening, Declan came in from splitting wood to find Lenora reading aloud in the parlor, while Elspeth sat curled against her side, the lamp turned low, the room smelling of the pine from the fire. He stopped in the doorway. Lenora looked up. He looked like a man who had forgotten that houses could feel like this. He went to bed without saying anything. But the next morning he made coffee without being asked and put a cup at Lenora's place at the table, and she thought that was probably the most he knew how to say right then, and she accepted it the same way, without commentary, just the fact of it. On the 10th day, Elspeth said, while they were weeding Ruth's kitchen garden together, "Are you coming back with us?" "That's the plan," Lenora said. "What if you don't like it there?" "Then I'll say so, and we'll figure something else out." Elspeth pulled up a weed and shook the dirt from its roots. "The others left," she said. "The women Papa hired before. They didn't like the house. What didn't they like about it?" Elspeth thought about it with the seriousness that 8-year-olds bring to actual questions. "I think they were lonely," she said. "It's far from town. And Papa doesn't talk a lot." "I've noticed," Lenora said. "Does that bother you?" Lenora looked at her. "I was raised by a man who showed up before dawn every morning and plowed his fields in the dark and never complained about a single day of it. He didn't talk much either. But I always knew exactly what he meant." Elspeth absorbed this. Then she said, almost casually, "I think I'd like it if you stayed." Lenora kept weeding. "I think I might like it too," she said. "Let's see." The journey back to Millhaven was different from the journey out. Elspeth sat next to Lenora and slept against her shoulder. On the second afternoon, the cloth bag of rocks clutched against her chest. Declan watched this for a while, and then looked out the window. "She hasn't done that with anyone since her mother," he said quietly. He wasn't looking at Lenora when he said it. Lenora didn't answer right away. She adjusted her arm slightly so it was more stable under Elspeth's weight. "She's ready," Lenora said finally. "She's been ready. She was just waiting for someone who wasn't going to leave the first time things got hard." Declan turned from the window. "How do you know you're not going to?" It was a fair question, possibly the fairest question anyone had ever asked her. "I don't know," Lenora said. "But I woke up this morning and I wasn't counting the days until I could go home. That's something." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back out the window. "The house is farther from town than most people prefer," he said. "About 6 miles north. The road's good in summer, rougher in winter. There's a neighbor, the Peterson farm, about 2 miles east, and their oldest daughter sometimes watches Elspeth if I need it. The market in Millhaven runs on Saturdays." He paused. I want you to know what you're coming to. I'm not going to dress it up." "I appreciate that," Lenora said. "It's not a bad life," he said. "It's just a quiet one." "I don't mind quiet," she said. "I mind dishonest." He nodded once. That seemed to settle something. The Rourke house was stone, of course, limestone from the quarry, fitted close and solid, with a front porch that looked north toward the tree line, and a kitchen garden on the east side, and a barn far enough from the house that you didn't smell it when the wind was right. Lenora stood in front of it the evening they arrived and took it in. It was not what she had expected, which was something smaller and rougher. This was a house that someone had built to last, built with care and intention, every corner square, every stone placed like it mattered.
You built this, she said. Most of it,
Declan said.
with 2 other men, over the winter of '88. It's a good house. He looked at it the way people look at things they made with their hands, and then stopped seeing because they've walked past them too many times. It is, he said, like he was noticing it again.
Elspeth ran ahead to the porch, checking on things she'd left behind, a pot of something she'd planted, the status of a loose board she'd apparently been meaning to report. She narrated all of it over her shoulder at no one in particular, or at both of them, it was hard to tell. Lenora's room was at the back of the house, with a window that faced east. In the mornings, the light came through it early, which suited her exactly. There was a washstand and a good lamp and a hook for her coat and a view of the kitchen garden, and she thought, I can work with this. The weeks that followed had their own rhythm. Mornings, Lenora was up before the house, which meant before Declan, which surprised her the first time, because she'd assumed a Quarry man would beat any clock. But he came down to find her already at the kitchen fire, and he stopped in the doorway the first morning with the expression of a man recalibrating again. After that, whichever of them came down first made the coffee. Neither of them discussed it. It just happened. Elspeth started coming down early too, not to the kitchen but to the back porch with her rocks, sorting them in the morning light
Before the day got away from her.
Lenora brought her coffee. Well, warm milk with a little coffee in it, enough to feel grown up, and left it on the step without comment. Elspeth drank it and didn't say anything about it, which was as close to thank you as she knew how to be at 8 years old, and probably as close as she needed to be. Declan watched all of this from the edges of it. He was not a man who participated easily, but he was not a man who didn't notice.
He fixed the loose board on the porch because Elspeth had mentioned it.
He came home one evening with a bag of lavender seeds from the market, because Lenora had said once, offhandedly, that she'd always wanted to grow it.
He didn't give it to her with any ceremony.
He just left it on the kitchen windowsill and went to wash up for supper. She found it and looked at it for a moment and then planted it the next morning in the corner of the kitchen garden. She didn't say anything about it to him. He didn't say anything about it to her. Some things don't need a conversation to become understood. 6 weeks in, on a Friday evening in late autumn, Elspeth announced at supper that she wanted to go back to school. It came out of nowhere and landed in the middle of the table like a stone dropped from a height. Declan looked at her. Lenora kept eating.
I thought you didn't want to go, Declan said carefully. I changed my mind, Elspeth said. What changed it? Elspeth looked at her plate.
Lenora said that when you let people keep you from doing things you want, you're giving them something they don't deserve. Declan looked at Lenora.
I said something like that, Lenora confirmed.
In a different context, she applied it. What context? He asked.
I was talking about myself, Lenora said. I stayed in Millhaven for a lot of years because I was afraid of what would happen if I left the post office.
Afraid my father needed me.
Afraid the town needed me. Afraid of what would be out there. She paused. I should have been more afraid of all the things I wasn't doing.
Declan was quiet for a moment. Then he said to Elspeth, if you want to go back to school, we'll work it out. Elspeth nodded, already moving on to the next bite of supper as if this had been decided hours ago, and she was only just delivering the paperwork. Later, when Elspeth was in bed and the house had gone quiet, Declan was at the table with some accounts he'd been working through and Lenora was reading near the fire. He said without looking up from his papers,
You're not what I expected. What did you expect? She asked. Someone who'd managed the situation, he said. Keep things running. Keep Elspeth fed and washed and supervised. Do the job. He was quiet for a moment. You're not managing it. He stopped, apparently unsatisfied with whatever word had come. Living here, Lenora offered. He looked up. Yes, he said. That.
The fire popped and settled. Outside the wind was picking up, the kind of wind that means the first real cold is coming.
Declan, she said. He waited. This thing we're doing, whatever it is, I need to know what you think it is. He set down his pen. He looked at her across the room.
A man who chose his words slowly and meant them exactly. I think it started as a solution, he said. And now? He looked at the fire. Now I think I come home in the evenings because I want to come home, not because I have to. He looked back at her. That's been a long time since that was true.
Lenora held his gaze.
I'm not going to tell you that's enough to build something on, she said.
No, he agreed.
But I'm also not going to pretend I don't understand what you mean.
She paused. I understand exactly what you mean. He nodded. Then he picked up his pen again. She picked up her book. The fire worked at the logs. The wind moved against the windows. Neither of them said anything else that night, and nothing needed to be decided that night, and that was all right. There was time. The house was solid and the winter was coming in, and Elspeth was asleep upstairs, with the lamp turned low and her rocks in their box under her bed, and there was time.